My name's Margot. Last year I changed my status to Miss and added a wedding band next to my collection of courtroom victories, slinging arguments before a judge. That's my zone. But dang, I never thought I'd need a defense strategy for family dinners. So, let me put you in the picture. My man, Tom, he's a mama's boy, and I get why. Mrs. Walters, his mom, is the queen bee of their hive. Did the single mom hustle? Brought up 2 kids solo? Mad props for that. Sarah, his sister? Well, she's another story. Thinks she's the center of the universe or something. I remember walking into their place for the first time. Tom's arm around me like he's showing off a trophy. The living room's like a shrine. Photos of Tom and Sarah plastered on every surface. It's cozy, but feels like stepping onto a movie set where they've been playing house for years. And suddenly, an unexpected guest star, Mrs. Walters. She came at me with this tight-lipped smile. You know the kind, the one that says, "I'm smiling because that's what I'm supposed to do, but I'd rather be scrubbing the bathroom grout with your toothbrush." Dressed in one of those floral numbers that just screamed, "I'm the matriarch." "Margot, dear, Tom's told us so much about you," she said, sizing me up like I'm a car she's not sure she wants to buy. "Yeah, I've been looking forward to meeting the famous Mrs. Walters," I said, trying to thaw the room a bit. "Oh, how sweet," Sarah chimed in, eyeing me like a hawk since I walked in. "Tell us, Margot, how's the lawyer life? I picture you in court like on TV, making bank. So, how much do you actually make?" I almost choked on my spit. Who asks that straight out of the gate? I laughed, though, 'cause what else are you going to do? You know, trade secret and all that. I shot back, not missing a beat. Mrs. Walters picked up the baton like it was a relay race. "But surely you can give us a ballpark figure for family?" Tom shot me that "please don't be mad" look, but I kept my cool. If I had $1 for every time someone asked me that, I'd have enough to change the subject. "Yeah," she snorted. "Well, it's no secret what a teacher earns, right, Tom?" "Mom," Tom sighed. "Let's not do this now." "Right, right," she said, waving her hand like she's dismissing a servant or something. "Anyway, you'll be like family now. Sharing is caring and all that." I slid a look at Tom. His help-me face was on full display. I knew then I wasn't just marrying Tom. I was enlisting in some low-key domestic Cold War. Couple of weeks in, and I'm standing in our kitchen, apron on, pot simmering, trying out Mrs. Walters's famous chili recipe. Now, Mrs. Walters and Sarah have got this routine. They drop over unannounced, like they forgot it ain't their house. "Your chili needs more heat." Mrs. Walters picks at the ladle like she might catch something. "And less salt. Watch your husband's blood pressure, got it?" I reply. Inside, I'm rolling my eyes so hard I'm seeing my brain. Sarah's there too, all leaned back on a stool like she's the Queen of Sheba. "You see this spot, Margot? Cleanliness is next to godliness, isn't it, Mom?" Mrs. Walters nods like it's gospel, and Sarah's high-fiving herself in her head. "Funny, I cleaned this place this morning," I say, swiping the spot off the counter. "Must have missed that one." Tom's in the other room, clueless, probably deep in some video game or sports stats. So I figure it's high time to fill him in on the home invasions. I poke my head in where he slouched on the couch. "Hey, you got a sec. What's up, babe?" Tom flicks his eyes up for just a moment. Poor thing, like he's afraid he might miss a crucial play. "Your mom and Sarah, they come in, take over, nitpick everything I do. It's like they're looking for stuff to complain about." I let it tumble out. Margot, they mean well. You know they're just..." Tom scratches his head. I'll talk to them. They'll chill out. Back to the kitchen, and it's like walking into the final round of some cook-off, where I'm the only contestant and the judges are out for blood. So, Margot, when's dinner? Tom must be starving. Sarah glances at me like I'm the help. Whenever the chili decides it's ready, I shoot back, keeping my voice light. It's a trope walk. Dinner lands on the table, and I'm scanning their faces. Mrs. Walters stirs hers around, inspecting every bean like it holds the secret to the universe. A bit different from how I make it, Mrs. Walters finally says, "That's code for nice try, but you're no match for me." Tom dives in, though, bless him. "Babe, this is awesome, right, Mom?" Sarah mutters, and Mrs. Walters just shrugs like she's agreeing with the worst food critic. After they leave, Tom's slapping his belly, saying it's all good. I'm watching the door shut behind them, feeling tiny like I'm losing at some game I didn't sign up to play. The next time they pop over, it's the same old tune like nothing changed. I must have been dreaming to think a few words from Tom might turn the tide. Still, I asked him to talk to his mother about boundaries. I thought not getting hitched was the hard part. Fitting into Tom's family, that's the real challenge. They've got their own idea of family, and I ain't in it yet. If this is what married life is like, count me out of the honeymoon phase. It was one of those days where the clock seemed to tick slower than syrup drips from a bottle. That's when my phone decided to sing its little heart out. Glancing at the caller ID, my heart sank. It was Mrs. Walters again. Margot. Her voice was stern, and it did nothing for my headache. "You think you can just snatch Tom away from us, huh?" Her words stung like vinegar on a paper cut. I glanced over at Tom, hoping he'd at least flinch at his mother's tone. Nothing. He's glued to the TV screen, a statue with no heartbeat. "Mrs. Walters, it's not like that. We're just trying to set up some boundaries," I said, my voice squeezed thin. "Boundaries," she fumed. "That's just a fancy word for shutting us out. You can't do that to us. To me, he's my son." As I blinked back frustration, Tom still silent, looking like someone shrunk his spine in the wash. "Listen, it's normal for married folks to want their own space." I tried to keep the edge out of my tone. "Space? He's never needed space before you came." Her sharp retort, her voice abuzz, and each word carved up my patience. That was when Tom decided to pipe up, but not to back me up. "No, Mom. Is everything okay? Margot's not, she's not being unreasonable, I guess," he said, but his voice was like wet cardboard. "Tom, I just can't believe this. First, Sarah tells me Margot is making a fuss over our visits, and now this." Mrs. Walters sounded wounded, and boy did Tom jump on that note. "Sarah said that?" Tom turned to me, eyebrows raised as if I was the one creating trouble. "Yeah, she did. And I think she's right. Family is family, Tom. You can't just turn your back on us." She pressed harder, knowing she was reeling him in. I saw my husband, a man I loved, deflate like a party balloon. 2 days after the fun, the call ended with promises of another family meeting that felt more like a summit to discuss the terms of my surrender. After the call, it was as if nothing happened. Tom settled back on the couch, resuming his championship in channel surfing. Mrs. Walters resumed her drive-bys, each one a masterclass in thinly veiled jabs. And Sarah? Well, she might as well have been a puppet master, the way she got Tom's ear whenever she pleased. When word got back to me that my husband's sister, Sarah, was running her mouth about me all over town, my blood boiled for a second. But I didn't let it get the best of me. I knew I had to handle this the right way. So I waited for the right moment to deal with Sarah directly, and that moment came sooner than I thought. I found Sarah at the market on a Saturday morning, filling her basket with groceries. She didn't see me at first, but I walked right up to her, steady and strong. "Sarah," I said. She looked up and rolled her eyes. "What do you want, Margot?" "We need to talk. It's about the stories you've been spreading." She snorted loudly, a smirk spreading across her face. "Stories? I don't know what you're talking about." "The rumors, Sarah. About me. Emily's bossy. Emily's this and that. Cut it out." She laughed, tossing an apple up and down in her hand. "And what are you going to do if I don't? You think you can boss me around?" I kept my cool. "Listen, spreading lies isn't just mean. It's slander, and I won't stand for it." Sarah laughed again, louder this time. "You're going to sue me? Get real, Margot. You ain't got the stomach for that. People's reputations are at stake." "I'm serious, Sarah. Keep it up. And yes, I will take legal action if I need to." The arrogance poured off her as she leaned in close. "You're in way over your head, little Miss City Lawyer, going to take me to court. This isn't a joke, Sarah. I'm giving you a chance to stop this nonsense before it gets serious." She shouted, her face closer to mine, a challenge plain in her expression. "Bring it on, Margot. Do your worst." With that, she spun on her heel, almost knocking over a display of canned beans, and left me standing there. Her laughter echoed through the aisle long after she was gone. I walked back home slower than usual, turning everything over in my mind. Later that day, when my husband came back from wherever he'd been, I told him what had happened. He was in the middle of taking his boots off, and he froze. One boot off, the other still on. "You did what now?" I told Sarah off. "I threatened her with legal action if she doesn't stop spreading rumors." His face went red, then white. "You couldn't just let it go. Why'd you have to stir the pot, Margot?" I straightened up. "Because it's not right, and I won't be walked over. Not by her, not by anyone." We were silent for a good long while after that, both of us lost in our thoughts. It was clear this was more than a little family squabble. It was a line drawn in the sand, and I had to stand my ground. He's got nothing, just stands there with that same lost puppy look that's growing a permanent spot on his face. I tossed myself onto the couch, fuming. The gossip might calm down for now. But Sarah, she's the kind of weed that keeps sprouting up. No telling when she'll start her yapping again. And Tom, God knows if he'll ever find the guts to stand up to them. Right now, though, I just need to cool off, figure out my next move in this messy game they're all too eager to play. The whole mess with Sarah had me weighing my options like a pros and cons list in my head. I mean, I signed up for a life with Tom, not a daily soap opera with his family. And with things going from bad to worse, the D word started rattling around in my brain like loose change in a dryer. Then, as if on cue, Mrs. Walters, the town's self-appointed gossip queen and Sarah's godmother, rings me up. "Margot, dear," she chirped like a bird that spotted a worm. "We're throwing a little shindig for Sarah's engagement. It's happening at Luigi's next week. We'd love to see you there." The tone of her voice was all fake nicety, the kind that practically screams, "I dare you to show up." I'm staring at the silent phone after hanging up, thinking how this invite smells like a setup. Tom's already on edge, and now this. I couldn't help but blurt out to him, "Guess who's got plans for us next week?" He's sitting at the kitchen table, forehead creased like he's trying to iron it out with thought. "Who's scheming now?" I say flat out. Your sister's engagement party. We're invited, courtesy of Mrs. Walters. His face goes a shade paler, the crease deepening. Oh, hell yeah! Oh, hell sounds about right. So, what's the play here, Tom? We roll over and play nice, or what? He's quiet for too long, and I'm not having it. Come on, spit it out, Tom. Finally, he looks up, his eyes all serious. Margot, it's family. I think we should go. I cross my arms, feeling the heat rise up my neck and let Sarah have a field day. I'm not their punching bag. He throws his hands up, a little too dramatic if you ask me. What do you want me to say? That's my sister Margot. I lean in, my own hands flat on the table. And I'm your wife. Or does that not count for much these days? The D word is right there on the tip of my tongue, but I bite it back hard. Tom runs his hand through his hair, making it stand up like he's just had an electric shock. Of course, it counts. Look, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here. I'm a heartbeat away from losing my cool. Well, guess what, sweetheart? So am I. I married you, not your constant need to please your family at my expense. Tom stands up, walks over, and takes my hands. They felt like rough grip paper, all work and worry. Margot, I love you. I do, and I hate that it's got to this. Let's not go to the party. You and me, we're a team, right? It struck me then that this was the first time in a long while he picked me over them without flinching. It felt like finding an oasis in the middle of the desert. That night, the thought of divorce quietly tucked itself away. Not gone, but sleeping. Sort of like a dog with one eye always open. But it was enough for me to catch my breath, to maybe believe that we could find some solid ground again. Luigi's was hopping when we showed up, walls throbbing with too loud laughter and clinking glasses. I spot Mrs. Walters right off, sitting queen bee style at the biggest table with that I rule the world look. There's Tom's sister Sarah, all grins like she's won the lottery, and her guy Mark, a sort of deer-in-headlights type trying to smile. His folks are with them too, stiff and awkward, like they wandered into the wrong movie theater. Mrs. Walters zeroes in on me the second we step in. Margot, she uses like, I'm a 5-year-old who's not playing nice. You'll be taking care of the bill tonight, right? To show you're one of us. I just about spit out my drink. What? Why me? The table's all ears now, and the air's thick with that, oh, this is going to be good vibe. Mrs. Walters stretches her smile. Tradition, sweetheart. The newest family member always shows their commitment. My jaw clamps shut so fast, I'm surprised I don't chip a tooth. Commitment? That sounds a whole lot like a shakedown. Everyone's perked up like they're hearing a whistle, and there she goes. Mrs. Walters puffing up like I've slapped her. Excuse me, that's uncalled for. Tom leans in, his voice barely more than a spit of sound. Just do it, Margot. It's not a big deal. A big deal? I fire back, whisper turned to a snarl. No thanks, I ain't no one's piggy bank. He's hissing now, real quiet but clear. Pay the damn bill, Margot, or we're through. I mean it. My laugh is as sharp as a snapped wire. You're not serious. He's all stone face and tight mouth. You think I'm playing? I stare him down. Divorce over this? He's all family first. Margot, I'm shaking my head. And where do I fit, huh? It's showdown time, and even Mark and his parents are watching, their faces screaming, "What the hell's going on?" I push back my chair and stand, letting them all get an earful. No, I ain't doing this dance, I say, voice like a hammer on steel. There's shock on their faces, some whispering, some wide-eyed. Tom's going red, white, red like a stoplight losing its mind. Mrs. Walters looks like she might choke. I walk out into the night. It's black and cool and smells like freedom. I hear the door slam behind me. My heart's doing a 100-yard dash, but it's Tom who's flown the D word, not me. The bar was nothing special, just another hole in the wall with dim lights and the smell of old beer. I had barely settled with a glass of something strong when my phone rang. It was Tom, and for a moment, I considered not answering, but I did. "Margot, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't want to say divorce." Tom's voice was rushed, apologetic before I could even think of a response. Sarah's voice blasted through. "You've ruined my engagement dinner, you selfish—" The phone must have changed hands so fast my head spun. I could practically hear the venom in her voice. In the background, I heard Mrs. Walters loud and clear. "Why should I pay? He's your son. You pay the bill. I won't have my daughter married into a family that doesn't know how to treat—" The chaos from Luigi's was spilling through the phone like a bad sitcom without a laugh track. People were arguing, and it seemed like nobody was keen on picking up the tab. I pushed away from the bar, my anger lending me a clear, calm voice. "Sarah, chill out. Your mom's the one making a scene, not me." "Hang up, Margot," Tom said, now a faint whisper behind his sister's ranting. "No, she needs to," Sarah kept going, but I wasn't about to play this game. I ended the call. The screen showed a string of missed calls and texts that I swiped away. They were probably all about the same thing: guilt, blame, the usual. I looked at the bartender. "Another one, please?" He nodded, pouring another shot without a word. Silence settled around me, except for the low murmur from the regulars scattered around. I tried to collect my thoughts. My phone screen lit up again, showing Tom's name. The guy just didn't know when to quit. I flipped the phone face down, letting it go to voicemail. It was futile to talk when the whole crew was going off the rails back there. A few drinks later, the door to the bar crept open, and in came a chilly gust of evening air. But I didn't look up. It didn't matter who was coming and going. I thought about what just happened, what it all meant. Here I was sitting in a bar because my family-in-law decided I was the bank, and instead of understanding, my supposed partner turned it into an ultimatum. I finally picked up my phone and typed out a text. "Tom, we're done. Sarah can think what she wants, and your mom can deal with her own damn bill. I won't be part of this circus anymore." Just as I hit send, the phone rang again. This time, I shut it off. I was tired of the arguing, the demands, and, above all, tired of feeling like I was alone in a partnership that was supposed to have my back. When the room finally stopped spinning and my head felt a little clearer, I knew what had to happen next. It was time to start looking forward, even if I had to do it on my own. No more games, no more being the scapegoat for a family that couldn't see past their own drama. I walked out of the bar, leaving the noise and the night behind. The air was getting colder, and the city lights were starting to blur into the coming darkness. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was mine to take. What a mess that last evening was. The whole thing at the restaurant blew up bigger than anyone thought. The groom had had it up to here with the drama and ditched the engagement right then and there. Sarah's face when he dropped that bomb? I can't even. No one saw it coming, least of all her. Then the mother-in-law went off the deep end. She was screaming like some banshee, causing such a scene that the groom's folks were ready to dial 911. "Disrespect," she was yelling, "no consideration." It was chaos, the kind of thing you see on those trashy daytime shows where chairs start flying. Meanwhile, I was done. I filed for divorce, cut phone ties with Tom and his calls, ignored his messages, deleted. The last I heard him, his sister, my former mother-in-law from hell, they're all huddled up in the same house, probably driving each other up the wall. As for me, it felt like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after years underwater. Life's simpler now, but that evening still the talk whenever I bump into people from the old circle. It gets old, you know. So here's the update for anyone who still cares. I'm living my best, most peaceful life. I'm sitting in my usual spot at the cafe down the street from my place, the one where the coffee is strong and no one asks too many questions. The barista gives me a nod, the usual he asks, like he's asking if the sky's up. Yep, I say. That's what my days are like now. No fluff or meddling in-laws. Work's a breeze when it's just that. Work. Free time is mine to enjoy without a sight of guilt trips or obligations. I curl up on my couch, that one piece of furniture that's followed me through all the moves. The springs are shot to hell, but it fits my back just right. I flip on the TV, watching some crime show where they catch the bad guys by minute 40. The peace is what gets me, not eerie or lonely, just peace. Breathe in, breathe out. No more walking on eggshells or cleaning up family feuds. This is living. When I hit the pillow each night, it's with a sense of I did it, no pat on the back needed. I know my worth, and finally, I'm living like it. I'm eating my lunch when the phone dings, a message from a number. I don't know, probably Tom using someone else's phone to reach out. I delete it without reading. Not today, Satan, not ever. Actually, they used to say, "You'll regret this." But here I am, not a single regret in sight. The day drags out, cozy and fine, and it ends with a glass of something smooth and a book I've been meaning to read. The heroine's tough but fair, reminds me of someone I know.
Hello, I'm Jennifer, 27 years old. I became an orphan at a young age when my parents tragically died in a car crash. They didn't have any family to look after me, so I was put into an orphanage. I was there for about 3 years before my parents adopted me. My adoptive parents turned out to be these billionaires, so I had a pretty rich and fulfilling life after that. They didn't want to make my adoption a big deal, so they kept it hushed up. They wanted to do good without it having been broadcast everywhere. When I turned into an adult and had my own place, the two of them decided that they wanted to expand their business further and took to touring Europe in search of opportunities. It was around this time that I met Jack, my now ex-husband. We met in college and instantly liked each other. After a couple of conversations, Jack, a very happy-go-lucky, caring man, made me like him a whole lot more. Our dates led to us becoming an official couple. We had the perfect relationship, although there was one problem. It was no secret that Jack's family did not like me. The first time I met them, Jack and I had just graduated college. He waited to introduce me to his parents until we were both well settled in our lives. By that I mean that we were both working good jobs. Jack had warned me that his parents tended to be a little judgmental when it came to their children's significant others, and he wanted me to make the best impression I could. I didn't mind, but meeting the parents was nerve-wracking for me. By the time Jack introduced me to his parents, we had been dating for a good 4 years. In those 4 years, we also got engaged, so I guessed that in itself was going to be a problem for his parents, considering they never even got to know me as his girlfriend. I remember freaking out about it with Jack the day before we were supposed to meet his parents. "They're going to hate me, Jack." "They won't, I promise you," Jack reassured me. "Do you not think that they'll be shocked to find out that we're engaged?" "Well, yeah, but I don't think it will be that big of a deal." "Are you being serious right now? You were scared about introducing me to them because you know how judgy they are, and you think introducing me as your fiancé is not going to make them judge me even more. Look, even if they do, will what they say really matter? It won't to me, but I don't know about you. You always seem so careful about them. I promise you that it won't affect or matter to me at all, Jennifer. All right, if you say so. But do you think maybe we should just not tell them we're engaged and then like a month or so later, we should tell them? Will that make you feel any better about this whole thing? Because I have no problem with either of the options. I think we should hide it just in case. I'll do anything to get on their good side. You have nothing to worry about. I'll be there with you no matter what. Thanks, Lee. The only reason. I had been freaking out so much because whenever I suggested that Jack tell his parents about me, he would make a whole fuss about them not going to approve of me. Now, at this point, I began to kind of understand why. You see, Jack's family were pretty rich, and they loved to live lavishly. They wanted that for their children as well, and the only way they accepted their children dating was if they also mingled with people who were as rich or even richer than them. The way I was living back then was by no means rich according to their standards. I hadn't told Jack about my family because I didn't see the point of it. Plus, by the time I figured out why he was so adamant about not letting me introduce myself to his parents, I felt like it was even more unnecessary for them to know just who my father was. I wanted them to like me for me and not for my money. I naively believed that they would like me that way, but boy was I wrong. We decided to meet Jack's parents at a fine dining restaurant. At that time, Jack held my hand as we walked in. I wore my engagement ring on my necklace because I wanted to keep it on me without actually drawing any attention to it. When we got to our table, his parents already looked upset. Jack told me to expect that because they were big sticklers about time. When we had arrived exactly 2 minutes late, well, we were already off to a bad start. His parents gave me a once-over and twisted their faces into disgust. They proceeded to ignore me for a little while as they made conversation with Jack. I will admit, I felt really small in their eyes. The longer they ignored my presence, the stronger my urge grew to leave. I kept my head down for the most part until finally Jack drew his parents' attention towards me. Mom, Dad, you can't just keep talking to me here. This is my wonderful girlfriend, Jennifer. Oh, hello. It's a pleasure to meet both of you. Hi. I wish I could say the same, Mom. What? I'm only speaking the truth. So, Jennifer, I heard you and Jack met in college, is that right? Yes, we did. We happened to share some classes together. Ah, and how did you manage to attend this college? From what I know, the tuition is pretty high and it's a pretty hard place to get into. Dad, that is enough. Jack, you will not speak to your father that way. He's asking a very valid question, Jennifer, please answer him. Well, I got a full ride there. I'm super grateful I got to go there because not only did I get to learn a lot of things, but I also got to meet Jack, which has been one of the best things that has happened to me. Of course, it's one of the best things that's happened to you. He's loaded, and you need that kind of money. At least you have some brains because your looks aren't all that good, you know. What? That's enough. We're leaving. Come on, Jennifer. Jack grabbed my hand, and we walked out. I was in shock at the way that his parents had treated me. I couldn't believe that people could be so mean, so openly and to the person's face. I was in too much shock to even feel anything. The car ride back home was silent because Jack was fuming. When we reached home, Jack made it a point to make sure that I was doing okay. But truthfully, at the moment, I really did not know how to feel. I had dressed up nicely and made sure that I sat properly as well. I didn't order anything expensive, but somehow, without me even saying a word, Rose and Tom made their judgment about me. Jack didn't speak to his parents for a while after that. They texted him and told him that we had been very disrespectful by walking out on them during lunch. Jack didn't respond to that and only texted them about a month later to tell them that he had gotten engaged. His parents weren't too happy about it, but Jack threatened them with no contact if they said or did anything against me. They offered to pay for our wedding on the condition that they got to make all the decisions regarding it. Obviously, neither Jack nor I wanted that, so we decided to do the next best thing, elope. My parents were in Europe, and they knew about me eloping. They were just happy that I was happy, and they did send Jack and me a gift. Jack did raise his brows at how they sent us a pretty expensive painting as a gift, but I just brushed it off as them having enough money to spend it on that. After getting married, we next met Rose and Tom at a party that they had hosted. They invited us to celebrate their anniversary. Truth be told, I was actually pretty happy that they had invited me despite the dislike they held for me. When we got there, I was ignored by everyone. If you think being ignored by 2 people was embarrassing, being ignored by about 30 people was even worse. I hung by Jack's side for the most part, but nobody even tried to talk to me. If I ever did try to speak and make conversation, people would just either look me up and down and walk away, or they would continue talking to Jack as if I never said anything. By the end of the night, I was in tears. I was humiliated and downright disgusted by the behavior that everyone was showing. The crowd had asked Rose and Tom to make a speech at the end of the night, and they got up to make one. By this time, I was tired, and I wanted to go home, but in their speech, they began by talking about how grateful they were to have almost everyone in the room in their lives. That was only the first jab that they threw at me. They kept making many more, which the guests kept laughing at. At some point, I just got up and walked out. I ordered an Uber and went back home. I cried the entire way back home and up until Jack got back home. When he got back, he seemed upset and angry. "Why did you walk out like that? Do you know how embarrassing that was for me?" "What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me right now, Jennifer. I had to endure my parents yelling at me and a lot of the guests pitying me for being with you. Are you serious? What about how embarrassing it was for me?" "Oh, come on, Jennifer. You could deal with it for one night. It was my parents' anniversary, for God's sake. I was ignored by everyone, and your parents chose to make even more fun of me in their toast. How do you possibly expect me to be okay with something like that? I'm not saying what they did was right, but you could have just lived through it. I would have spoken to them about it after. What would that have done for me? I don't like being put in positions where I'm only being humiliated." Everyone was laughing at me. "You've never been in that position before, so it's easy for you to talk about this like it's no big deal. My parents expect an apology from you. I want one too. I'm afraid that I won't be doing that. I'll only do that if they give me one too. Ask for your apology. I see no reason for apologizing to you. You always stood up for me. I don't see why this is any different. This is very different because, unlike before, you humiliated my family in front of all guests, and your parents humiliated me, your wife, in front of all their guests. Maybe my parents were right about you. You're impossible." With that, Jack went to sleep in the guest bedroom. I couldn't understand why he had a sudden change of behavior. Was it really that bad for him? After I walked out, he was always the first person to stand up for me, especially considering the fact that I was usually bored with whatever his parents had to say about me. For me to walk out should have been the biggest signifier of just how bad they made me feel, yet Jack didn't seem to care about that. Jack didn't talk to me for the next week. I also got a lot of texts from his parents calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment. I tried to talk to Jack, but he refused to. Eventually, I decided to give in and apologize to both him and his parents. Even that felt humiliating, but I was willing to go through it because I loved Jack, and I didn't want this to be the hill I died on. Things after that only got worse for me. Jack's parents retired and spent a lot of their time hosting family dinners. They hosted it once a week, and Jack was always invited. The first time they hosted it, Jack brought me along with him to their house. As soon as I stepped in, the atmosphere in the room got awkward. Rose was busy getting ready, so she didn't see me immediately, but Tom and the rest of Jack's siblings awkwardly glanced at me. They didn't talk to me, and Jack left me to stand by myself while he caught up with the rest of his family. When Rose came downstairs, she saw me and practically flew over to me in rage. "What are you doing here?" "Excuse me." "No, I will not excuse you. What are you doing in my house right now?" "Well, you invited us for dinner." "Wrong. I invited Jack because it's a family dinner. I'm Jack's wife, so I'm a part of this family, am I not?" "Absolutely not. An orphan like you deserves no space in this family." "What? You thought you could hide that detail from us? We do background checks on our children's spouses, and you are not in my son's league whatsoever. I will never accept you here." "Why not?" "That can't be the only thing that determines whether I get to be a part of your family. You're ugly and poor. You'd never fit into our elite circles. Why are you being so superficial? Are you scared that I'll damage your reputation just by existing? Does the fact that I bring your son happiness not satisfy you? If happiness brought in money, a lot of people would be billionaires. This is exactly why you'd never fit in with us. Or maybe I'll just never be as superficial as the rest of you because I value who a person actually is. You never even took the chance to get to know me before casting your judgments on me. I'm glad I don't fit in with you. Jennifer, that's enough. Here's some money. Get yourself an Uber and leave." I stared at Jack in shock as he held out the money. He shoved it into my hands and turned back towards his mother. She smirked at me. I felt tears spring into my eyes as I turned back around and walked out. I was once again crying in the Uber. I didn't understand why Jack had changed so drastically. Was this his way of making up to his parents after the party? Whatever it was, I was hurt and angry at him. He was okay with his parents using my past as an insult and defending them instead of me like he usually did. I wanted to yell and scream, but I knew that would only project a worse image of me and prove them right, which is why I walked away. I tried to think if anything I said was out of line, but I really did not see anything wrong. I was merely standing up for myself, calmly might I add. After Jack came back home, he went back to not talking to me. My heart was breaking, and I felt so alone. I knew that he expected another apology, but I couldn't bring myself to do it like the last time. Rose had blatantly insulted me in the worst way, and Jack was angry at me for it. If anything, I expected an apology from him. For the next 2 weeks, Jack and I didn't speak to each other. It was hard at first, but I got used to it eventually. The dinner his family hosted still happened, and about once a week, I was all alone at home, which I truthfully did not mind. On one of those nights, my parents video called me. "Hey honey." "Hey sweetie, how's it going?" "Hey dad, hey mom." "Things are not good." "Why?" "What's wrong, sweetie?" "If you need help with anything, feel free to ask us. I don't think this is something you guys would be able to help me out with, but thanks for the offer." "Where's Jack? Is he not helping?" "That's the thing. He's part of the problem." "Huh? Sweetie, could you be a little more clear about what the problem is?" "Well, his parents are pretty wealthy and also very snobby." "Oh, I hate those kinds of people. Tell me about it." "Anyways, they thought that I was some poor girl who could never live up to their standards and fit into their elite circles, so they took it upon themselves to humiliate me every time that I met them." "What the hell?" "Oh yeah, and the last time I went over, Jack's mom decided calling me an orphan was a good insult. Oh, that woman. I'm going to claw her face off. How dare she call my precious child an orphan? Do they not know about us? And what the hell has Jack been doing in all this? I didn't tell them about you guys because I knew that their opinion of me would change if they knew, and I wanted them to like me for who I was and not for my wealth. As for Jack, he's siding with them. He thinks that I was disrespectful when I stood up for myself. Honey, are you sure this is the man you want to be with? I love him a lot, but this is not how I want it to be. We haven't been speaking to each other for the last 2 weeks, and I'm surprisingly okay with that. Alright, sweetie. I'll get you in touch with one of my friends over there. Don't worry about us not being able to help you out. I think we might actually be able to help you get a little sweet revenge, huh? What? What do you mean? Your dad and I are coming there next week. We wanted to take you and Jack on a vacation, but now we can just take you. More things for us to do together, I guess. Really? Oh my God, I'm so excited to finally get to see the two of you in person again. That was a real pick-me-up. Finally, I felt happy after so long. The three of us continued to talk for a little while after that. Dad elaborated on his plan to help me. After a little while, he asked me where these dinners of theirs were being held. As far as I knew, they took turns hosting in their house and at restaurants. Conveniently, the week that my parents were coming, the dinner was going to happen in a restaurant. I needed to get information on where exactly this dinner was going to be held so I could provide my parents with the location. Thankfully, I had Jack's email logged into my phone, and if there was one thing I knew about Rose and Tom, it was that they loved to email everyone everything. It wasn't that hard to get the location, and I gave it to my parents. At the same time, my mom's lawyer friend contacted me, and we got started on the process of filing for divorce. My parents landed in the States and decided to check into their hotel, where I met them. We had lunch together, and then the two of them sent me on my way for a spa day that they entirely paid for because they thought I deserved it. While they got ready to get revenge on my in-laws, my parents walked into the restaurant where Jack and his family were dining. According to Dad, when they approached the table, Tom and Rose began to murmur among themselves as they recognized who he was. Mom told me that this was how the conversation went. Hello. Oh my gosh, Mr. Burns. What brings you here? Oh wow, I just happened to see some familiar faces and I figured that I could drop in and probably dine with you. Familiar faces. Who are you speaking about, Mr. Burns? Well, I see Jack. Me? Well, hello. A pleasure to meet you. Your daughter has spoken a lot about you. But speaking of my daughter, where is she? Your daughter? I'm afraid you're mistaken. I don't think she's here. But she should be, right? I'm sorry, Mr. Burns, but we didn't even know that you had a daughter. Of course I do, and she's married to Jack. What? I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken. Yes, his wife's name is Jennifer, and she was an orphan. Yes, I do know that, and that is why we adopted her. Excuse me. You're her dad. Yes, and from what I see, she isn't here. She's been telling me that there have been some problems with her in-laws, but I see what the problem was. It was you. No, she was the one who hid this huge thing from us. If we knew, you would have treated her better. She didn't want you to treat her nicely because of her background. Oh well. She did ask me to hand this over to Jack. My dad handed Jack the divorce papers and walked out. After that, it only took a couple of phone calls for a lot of investors to pull away from Tom's business. They were quickly crashing, and nothing was more satisfying than watching them crumble down to the levels that they made fun of. I got a lot of texts from all of Jack's family, calling me a bunch of nasty names, while some of them begged me to talk to my dad and reverse what he had done. Jack thankfully signed the divorce papers without any hassle. My parents and I went on a long vacation after that. I had the time of my life, and I slowly began to heal. Yeah, it hurt that I had lost the love of my life, but I also learned just how important it is to stand up for myself. I'm forever grateful to my parents for everything they've done for me, and I can't wait to see what else life has to offer me.
My fingers trembled as I stared at Brandon's phone, the bright screen illuminating words that shouldn't exist. 3 years of text messages to someone named Nora. 3 years of "I miss you and can't wait to see you," and "my wife doesn't understand me." I had to read them twice, 3 times, until the words burned themselves into my brain. I'm Isla, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I knew what betrayal meant. The kitchen counter felt cold under my palms as I steadied myself. 26 years of marriage reduced to a series of digital love notes and explicit photos. Brandon had left his phone unlocked when he rushed to take that emergency business call in the backyard. Now I knew why he always took those calls outside. "Mom, everything okay?" Lucas appeared in the doorway, his college graduation photo still prominently displayed on the fridge behind him. My son, perceptive as always. "Just checking the time," I lied, sliding the phone back to its exact position on the counter. The muscle memory of covering for Brandon kicked in automatically, even now. "Your father's been on that call forever." Lucas crossed his arms, looking so much like his grandfather, my father, in that moment that my chest ached. "You're white as a sheet." "Must be the lighting." The words came out hollow. Through the window, I could see Brandon pacing near the oak tree, gesturing animatedly. He was wearing the blue shirt I'd ironed this morning, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary last month, the same shirt he wore in one of those photos with her. "I should start dinner," I said, but made no move toward the refrigerator. My mind was already racing ahead, calculating. The joint accounts, the farm my parents left us, the life insurance policies. "Mom!" Lucas's voice was gentle. "What did you find?" I turned to face my son, this young man who'd grown up watching me smooth things over, make excuses, keep the peace, just like my mother had done, until the day she died. The Thompson women, always protecting their men from consequences. "Nothing that wasn't there all along," I said finally. "I just wasn't looking." Brandon's laugh drifted through the window, that rich, charming sound that had first drawn me to him at 19, the same laugh he probably used on Nora, 26 years old, the same age I was when Lucas was born. "Whatever it is," Lucas said, "you don't have to handle it alone." I picked up the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables before Brandon's phone had buzzed with that fatal message. The weight felt good in my hand. Solid. Real. "You're right," I said, setting it down carefully. "I don't." Brandon's voice grew louder as he approached the back door. I could time it perfectly. 3 steps across the patio, 2 more to the door, then he'd breeze in with some excuse about work, kiss my cheek, and ask what's for dinner, like he had 1,000 times before. But this time would be different. This time I wouldn't smile and nod. This time I thought of my father's words on his deathbed. "The farm's yours, Isla. Don't let anyone take what's yours." I heard the back door open. "Sorry about that, honey," Brandon called out. "You wouldn't believe the day I'm having." I picked up his phone, unlocked it again with the password I wasn't supposed to know, and turned to face the door. "Actually," I said, "I think I would." The look on his face told me everything I needed to know about the war that was coming, and for the first time in 26 years, I was ready to fight. The next morning, I watched Brandon pack his overnight bag like it was any other business trip. His movements were precise, practiced, the same routine I'd watched for 26 years. Only now I noticed how he checked his phone 3 times while folding a single shirt. "The Thompson account needs my personal attention," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I'll be back Thursday." I nodded, thinking of the texts I'd seen. "Can't wait for our weekend getaway." The timestamp showed Nora had sent it yesterday afternoon. "The farm's property taxes are due next week," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We should discuss the payment before you leave." Brandon's hand stilled over his suitcase. "I thought we agreed to sell the back 40 acres. "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "You suggested it. I never agreed." "Isla." He used that tone, the one that always made me feel small, unreasonable. "The farm's bleeding us dry. Your parents wouldn't want—" "Don't!" My fingers curled around the doorframe. "Don't tell me what my parents would want." Lucas appeared in the hallway, coffee mug in hand. The tension in the room hit him like a physical wave. Everything okay? Your mother's being stubborn about the farm again, Brandon said, zipping his bag with unnecessary force. Lucas set his mug down. The farm that puts food on our table? The one that paid for my college? The one that's now worth millions to developers, Brandon countered. We could all retire tomorrow if we betrayed everything my father built? The words escaped before I could stop them. Brandon's head snapped up, eyes narrowing at my choice of words. I need to check the accounts, I continued, softer now. Make sure we have enough for the taxes. I'll handle it. Brandon reached for his laptop bag. Like I always do. No, I stepped forward. I think it's time I took a more active role in our finances. The silence that followed felt like thunder before a storm. Brandon's smile didn't reach his eyes. Honey, you've never shown interest in the business side before. Why start now? Because it's my legacy too. I met his gaze. My name's on those accounts. Lucas moved closer to me, his presence solid and reassuring. I can help, Mom. My degree's in finance, after all. Brandon's laugh held an edge. This isn't a school project, son. No, Lucas replied. It's family. The word hung between us like an accusation. Brandon checked his watch, another practiced gesture I now saw through. We'll discuss this when I return, he said, shouldering his bags. I have a plane to catch. As he headed for the door, I called after him. Brandon, the Thompson account. That wouldn't happen to be in Aspen, would it? He paused, just for a fraction of a second. Denver, why? Just curious. I smiled, thinking of Nora's Instagram post from yesterday. A ski resort tagged in Aspen. Have a safe flight. After he left, Lucas turned to me. Mom? I need you to teach me everything you know about forensic accounting, I said, still staring at the door. And I need you to be discreet about it. Does this have anything to do with what you saw on Dad's phone? I thought of my mother, how she'd kept quiet about my father's struggling farm until it was almost too late. How she'd finally taken charge, saved everything through sheer determination. The steel in her spine when she told my father, "This ends now." This has everything to do with protecting what's ours, I said. Your grandfather didn't build this legacy so your father could sell it to the highest bidder. Lucas nodded slowly. Or spend it on someone else. My son, too perceptive by half. Get your laptop, I said. We've got 3 days before he returns, and I want to know exactly where every penny has gone. As Lucas disappeared upstairs, I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. The password Brandon thought I didn't know unlocked 26 years of financial records. Somewhere in those numbers, Nora's footprints would be waiting, and this time, I wouldn't look away. The numbers on Lucas's laptop screen blurred together as midnight approached. 2 days of digging through financial records had left me numb until I saw it, a pattern of transfers to an offshore account, each one timed perfectly with the farm's quarterly profits. He's been doing this for 5 years, Lucas said, his voice tight. Every time the farm turned a profit, he diverted half to this account in the Caymans. I stared at the total, $2.3 million. My father's legacy, draining away like water through cupped hands. There's more, Lucas continued, clicking through documents. The development company interested in the back 40? Dad's been meeting with them for months. He's already signed preliminary paperwork. The betrayal felt physical, like a fist to the stomach. He can't sell without my signature. No, but... Lucas hesitated. Mom, he's been forging your signature on other documents. Small things at first, but recently... A notification popped up on my phone. Brandon's nightly check-in call. I let it ring. Show me everything, I said. Lucas pulled up document after document. My signature, almost perfect but slightly off, appeared on loan applications, property assessments, even a power of attorney I'd never seen. The bank called earlier, Lucas said quietly. They're concerned about unusual activity on the farm's business account. My phone buzzed again. A text from Brandon. Why aren't you answering? Everything okay? I thought of my mother's voice. A Thompson woman knows when to fight. She'd said it the day we discovered my father's cancer, when the medical bills threatened to overwhelm us. She'd fought then, saved the farm, saved us all. We need to move fast, I said. How much can we legally transfer before he returns? Lucas's fingers flew over the keyboard. The farm account's in both your names, but the equipment loan is only in his. If we... A sharp knock at the front door cut him off. Through the window, I saw Walter Thompson's Mercedes in our driveway, its headlights still burning. Uncle Walter? Lucas frowned. It's almost midnight. I stood, smoothing my shirt. Let him in. Walter Thompson filled the doorway like a storm cloud, his expensive suit incongruous in our farmhouse kitchen. Isla, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. Brandon called. Says you're not answering his calls. I've been busy, I replied. Looking at our finances. Something flickered in Walter's eyes. Brandon handles all that. Not anymore. I gestured to Lucas's laptop. Would you like to see what your nephew's been doing with my family's money? Walter stepped closer, his cologne too sharp in the small space. Whatever you think you found, 2.3 million, I cut in, transferred to the Caymans, plus forged signatures, hidden accounts, and a deal to sell land he doesn't fully own. Business is complicated, Walter said, but his confidence wavered. Brandon knows what he's doing. Yes, I agreed. He's stealing from me to fund his new life with Nora Sanders, the same Nora who used to work for your company, the one you fired last year for embezzlement. Walter's face went slack. How did you... I called your secretary. Margaret still likes me, even if you don't. She told me everything about Nora's creative accounting, and now she's got her hooks in Brandon. Lucas stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder. Walter looked between us, calculation replacing shock. What do you want? He asked finally. I thought of Brandon in Aspen, probably celebrating his clever schemes with his young girlfriend. Thought of my father's calloused hands working this land, my mother's quiet strength preserving it. I want what's mine, I said, and I want Brandon to learn what it feels like to lose everything he thought was secure. Walter's laugh was cold. You're going to war with the wrong people, Isla. No, I replied, thinking of the evidence safely backed up on 3 different devices. I'm finally fighting the right ones. As Walter turned to leave, I called after him. Tell Brandon I'll see him Thursday. And Walter? The SEC might be interested in those offshore accounts you helped him set up. The door slammed behind him. Lucas let out a shaky breath. Mom, are you sure about this? I looked at my son, seeing my father's determination in his eyes. Some things are worth burning bridges for. We turned back to the laptop, and I began to type an email to our family lawyer. Thursday was coming, and I had a legacy to protect. The morning before Brandon's return, I found myself in my parents' old bedroom, now my home office. The lawyer's documents lay spread across my mother's antique desk, each page outlining a different betrayal. Loan applications, property liens, forged signatures. My phone buzzed. Another message from Brandon. Coming home early. We need to talk. A familiar perfume bottle caught my eye, still sitting on the dresser where my mother left it. The day before she died, she'd told me, sometimes the hardest part isn't discovering the truth, it's deciding what to do with it. Lucas appeared in the doorway, his laptop in hand. Mom, you need to see this. He pulled up an email chain between Brandon and the developers. The most recent message made my blood run cold. Once the property transfers are complete, we'll proceed with the full acquisition. Mrs. Thompson's signature won't be an issue. There's more, Lucas said, scrolling down. They're not just after the back 40. They want the whole farm. And Dad, he's already promised it to them. The room seemed to tilt. When? The final meeting's scheduled for next week. They're offering $30 million. I touched my mother's perfume bottle, remembering how she'd fought to keep this land when the banks threatened foreclosure. Show me the rest. Lucas hesitated. Mom, maybe we should wait. Show me. He pulled up another document. A prenuptial agreement I'd never seen. Dated 3 weeks ago. Brandon's name. Nora's name. A property division that left me with nothing. The doorbell rang downstairs. That's probably Margaret, Lucas said. She said she had more documents from Uncle Walter's office. I'll get it. But when I opened the door, Nora Sanders stood on my porch. She wore expensive clothes that tried too hard, jewelry that sparkled too bright. Young, beautiful, and utterly calculated. Mrs. Thompson, she said, her smile perfect and practiced. I think it's time we talked. I should have slammed the door. Instead, I stepped aside. Come in. She walked into my house like she already owned it, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors my father had installed. Lucas appeared at the top of the stairs, his face darkening when he saw our visitor. I'll make coffee, he said, his tone making it clear he'd stay close. Nora settled onto our couch, the one Brandon and I had picked out together 15 years ago. I assume you know who I am. I know what you are. I remained standing. The question is, why are you here? To make a deal. She opened her designer bag, pulled out a folder. Brandon doesn't know I'm here. He thinks charm and manipulation will handle everything. Men usually do. I thought of Walter's warning about going to war with the wrong people. What kind of deal? The kind where you walk away with dignity and $10 million. She slid the folder across the coffee table. Better than fighting a losing battle, don't you think? I picked up the folder but didn't open it. And if I refuse? Then things get ugly. Her smile never wavered. Brandon's not the only one who knows how to forge signatures. One wrong move and you'll lose everything, including your son's trust when certain documents come to light. The threat hung in the air like smoke. From the kitchen doorway, Lucas watched, his hands gripping his laptop like a shield. I thought of my father's words. Don't let anyone take what's yours. But he'd never faced someone like Nora. Young, ruthless, and holding all the cards. Or so she thought. I opened the folder, scanned the contents, then carefully set it down. Interesting offer, but you made one mistake. Oh? Her confidence flickered just slightly. You assumed Brandon told you everything. I pulled out my phone, showed her the email I'd received that morning from the SEC. Did he mention the federal investigation? Or that I've been cooperating with them for the past 2 days? The color drained from her perfect face. In the kitchen, Lucas smiled. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, I knew exactly who my enemies were and how to fight them. Brandon's homecoming dinner filled our dining room with artificial warmth. He'd brought expensive wine, arranged flowers on the table, playing the role of devoted husband while his phone buzzed silently in his pocket. Probably Nora, warning him about our meeting. The Thompson account went well, he said, cutting into his steak. We should celebrate this weekend. Maybe drive up to the lake house? Lucas caught my eye across the table. The lake house, another asset Brandon had secretly mortgaged, according to the documents we'd found. Actually, I said, I was thinking we should host the harvest dinner here this year, like my parents always did. Brandon's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Honey, we haven't done that in years. Exactly. Time to revive some traditions. I took a sip of wine. I've already invited the whole family. Even Uncle Walter. The color drained from Brandon's face so quickly, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. That's not a good idea, he said carefully. With the farm's financial situation, I've been looking into that. I kept my voice light, casual. Found some interesting transactions. The accountant's coming tomorrow to go through everything. Brandon's knuckles whitened around his fork. I handle the finances. Not anymore. I set down my glass. The SEC called again today. They had some questions about offshore accounts. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Lucas pushed back his chair. I should check on those spreadsheets, he said, leaving us alone. Brandon waited until Lucas's footsteps faded upstairs. Whatever you think you know, I know everything. I pulled out my phone, showed him the prenup he'd drafted with Nora. Your girlfriend's quite the negotiator, but she should have asked more questions about those accounts before threatening me. Isla. His charm switched on like a light. Let me explain. The harvest dinner's Saturday. Everyone will be here. The family, the bank managers, even those developers you've been meeting with. I stood, gathering the plates. You have 3 days to decide how this ends. He grabbed my wrist, hard enough to hurt. You're making a mistake! No! I twisted free, feeling something inside me harden. I made my mistake 26 years ago when I married you. His phone buzzed again. This time, he checked it. Nora's getting nervous, isn't she? I asked. Wondering if her investment in you is about to collapse? Brandon stood so quickly his chair toppled backward. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I do. I thought of my mother's strength, my father's integrity. I'm dealing with a coward who tried to steal my family's legacy, and I'm done being quiet about it. He moved toward me, but Lucas appeared in the doorway. Everything okay, Mom? Brandon's mask slipped back into place. Just a disagreement about the harvest dinner. Right, Lucas said. The one where Mom's planning to show everyone the forensic accounting reports? The threat hung between us like smoke. Brandon's jaw clenched. This isn't over, he said quietly. No, I agreed. But it will be on Saturday. After he stormed out, Lucas helped me clear the table. He'll try something before Saturday. I'm counting on it. I picked up Brandon's discarded napkin, noticed how his hands had shaken enough to tear it. That's why I made copies of everything. Lucas paused. Mom? What aren't you telling me? I thought of the other documents I'd found, the ones showing Walter's company was on the verge of collapse, taking Brandon's secret investments with it. The evidence of years of tax fraud that would destroy them both. Just remember what Grandpa always said, I told him. The truth has a way of harvesting itself. Outside, Brandon's car engine roared to life. He was probably heading straight to Nora, or maybe Walter, trying to salvage his carefully constructed lies. Let him run. Let him plot. Saturday was coming, and I had seeds of my own to harvest. The harvest dinner table stretched before me like a battlefield. Brandon sat at one end, Walter at the other, both wearing practiced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Between them, our guests chatted over my mother's old china, oblivious to the storm about to break. Nora hadn't shown up. Her absence spoke louder than her presence ever could. The farms never looked better, Walter announced, raising his glass. Brandon tells me you're considering some exciting new developments. My hand tightened around the USB drive in my pocket. Lucas caught my eye from across the table, giving a subtle nod. The projector was ready in the study. Actually, I started, but Brandon cut me off. We should discuss business later, he said smoothly. Tonight's about family. The word family hit like a slap. I thought of the email I'd received an hour ago, proof that Brandon had already transferred the farm's deed to a shell corporation. He'd forged my signature one final time, betting I wouldn't dare expose him publicly. Speaking of family, Walter continued, I have an announcement. Brandon's being promoted to CEO of Thompson Industries, effective immediately. The table erupted in congratulations. Brandon's smile turned triumphant as he accepted handshakes and praise. Only Lucas and I remained silent. A toast, Walter declared, to the new face of Thompson Industries. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood. Before we celebrate, there's something everyone should see. Brandon's face hardened. Isla, don't. The SEC investigation, I began, but suddenly every phone at the table buzzed simultaneously. Brandon's smile widened as our guests checked their phones. I pulled out mine, feeling the blood drain from my face. Breaking news. Thompson Industries announces merger with Global Development Corp. Stock soars. As I was saying, Walter continued, this promotion comes with some changes. The farm property has been acquired as part of the merger. Full market value, of course. My hands shook. That's impossible. I never signed. Check your email, Brandon said quietly. You signed everything last month, don't you remember? The forged documents. He'd backdated them all, created a paper trail so perfect it would take months to prove the fraud. Months we didn't have. You have until Monday to vacate, Walter added. The developers start work next week. Lucas stood. Mom, show them the evidence, the offshore accounts, What evidence? Brandon pulled out a familiar USB drive, identical to the one in my pocket. This evidence? My blood ran cold as I pulled out my drive. It was blank, wiped clean. Somewhere in the house, during the dinner preparations, they'd made the switch. Your mother's been under tremendous stress lately, Brandon told the table, imagining all sorts of conspiracies. We've arranged for her to take some time off, get the help she needs. The room spun. They'd planned this perfectly. Discredit me before I could expose them. Make any accusations seem like the ravings of a desperate woman. You can't, I started, but Walter raised his hand. Please, he said to our guests. Give us a moment with family. As people filed out, Brandon approached me. I warned you not to play games you don't understand. The SEC has closed their investigation. Amazing what the right connections can do. Lucas moved to stand beside me, but Brandon blocked his path. Son, your mother needs professional help. We've arranged everything. Like you arranged Nora? Lucas snapped. Brandon's smile never wavered. Nora's been transferred overseas. A generous promotion, in exchange for her discretion. I thought of my parents, how they'd fought to keep this land, how I'd failed them. Monday morning, Walter said firmly. The developers arrive at 9. They left us there, Lucas and me, standing in my mother's dining room for what would be the last time. Through the window I could see the farm stretching out under the harvest moon. 26 years of marriage, generations of family history, all slipping away like water through my fingers. Lucas touched my arm. Mom? Get me Margaret on the phone, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And find out everything you can about Global Development Corp. They'd taken my evidence, my home, my reputation. But they'd forgotten one thing. A Thompson woman knows how to survive a harsh harvest, and I wasn't finished reaping what they'd sown. Sunday morning, I sat in my father's old truck outside Thompson Industries, watching Brandon and Walter arrive for their victory lap. They'd scheduled a press conference to announce the merger, complete with plans for the farm's redevelopment. My phone buzzed. Margaret's text. Files sent. God help them. Lucas pulled up beside me, parking his car. Nora's flight landed an hour ago. And? She went straight to the SEC office, just like you said she would. I checked my watch. The press conference would start in 20 minutes. Brandon and Walter would be preparing their speeches, savoring their triumph. They'd never see it coming. Inside, the lobby buzzed with reporters and shareholders. Brandon stood at the center, radiating charm, while Walter worked the crowd. Their eyes widened when they saw me. Isla, Brandon moved to intercept me. This is a private event. Nothing about Thompson Industries is private anymore. I handed him a tablet. Check your company's stock price. His face went ash gray as he read the breaking news. SEC launches criminal investigation into Thompson Industries merger. Whistleblower reveals massive fraud. Walter snatched the tablet. What did you do? Me? Nothing. I smiled. But Nora, she had quite a story to tell once she realized you'd frozen her offshore accounts. Brandon's charm cracked. You're bluffing. Check your email. Margaret sent some interesting documents this morning. Turns out your trusted secretary kept copies of everything. Reporters were noticing the tension, drifting closer. Walter grabbed my arm. Security will remove you. Before or after they see this? Lucas stepped forward, holding up his phone. A video played. Brandon and Walter in the study during the harvest dinner, discussing the forged documents, the fake merger, the plan to commit securities fraud. You bugged my house, Brandon whispered. No. I met his eyes. I bugged my house. The one you tried to steal. Cameras were turning our way now. Walter's face had gone from red to purple. Whatever you think you have is already with the FBI. I raised my voice slightly, letting the reporters hear. Along with proof of tax fraud, forged documents, and evidence of how you bankrupted your last 3 companies. Brandon lunged for Lucas's phone, but security moved in. Not to remove me, but to contain the situation. The crowd was growing, phones recording everything. You can't prove, Walter started, but his phone rang. His face crumpled as he listened. When he hung up, he looked ancient. The board, he said to Brandon. They're calling an emergency meeting. The merger's dead. Brandon's mask finally shattered. You stupid bitch. You've destroyed everything. No! I thought of my mother's strength, my father's integrity. I protected what's mine. The farm stays in the family. The only thing destroyed is your illusion of power. Mrs. Thompson? A FBI agent appeared, flanked by others. We need to speak with Mr. Thompson and Mr. Thompson? As they were led away, Brandon turned back. I gave you everything you have. No, I said quietly. You tried to take everything I earned. There's a difference. The press swarmed as Brandon and Walter were escorted out. Lucas put his arm around my shoulders. Mom, you okay? I watched my husband of 26 years disappear into a federal vehicle, thinking of all the quiet dinners, the subtle manipulations, the years of making myself small to make him feel big. The farm needs attention, I said finally. Harvest season's not over. Outside, reporters shouted questions about the scandal, the investigation, the millions in fraudulent deals. But all I could think about was the autumn wind on my face, the smell of earth after rain, and my father's words, "The land remembers who loves it." Brandon had forgotten that. He'd forgotten that real power isn't in boardrooms or bank accounts. It's in the quiet strength of people who know their worth. Let's go home, I told Lucas. There's work to be done. Behind us, Thompson Industries crumbled. But ahead, across the fields my parents had preserved, a different kind of harvest waited. One built on truth, not lies, on legacy, not greed. And this time, I'd be the one tending it. The divorce papers lay unsigned on my mother's antique desk next to the morning's newspaper. The headline still caught my eye. Thompson Industries executives face federal charges. Brandon's corporate headshot stared back at me, his practiced smile now a reminder of all the lies I'd believed. Through the window, I watched Lucas directing the harvest crew across the back 40, the land Brandon had tried so hard to take. The autumn sun caught the golden wheat, making it look like waves of light. My phone buzzed. Nora's name appeared on the screen. "I'm not testifying," she said without preamble. "Brandon's lawyers offered a deal. I figured they would." I traced my finger along the desk's worn edge, remembering my mother doing the same when making difficult decisions. "But you should know, the SEC already has everything they need." A long pause. "He said you'd say that." "He says a lot of things, Nora. That's why we're both here." The line went dead. Through the window, I saw Lucas wave to someone, Margaret, arriving with another stack of documents. She'd been instrumental in exposing Walter's long history of fraud, earning herself immunity in the process. The doorbell rang. I knew who it would be. Brandon stood on our porch, my porch now, looking smaller somehow. The designer suit was gone, replaced by department store clothes that didn't quite fit. "The prosecutors offered a plea deal," he said. "I know. 5 years instead of 20. He shifted, uncomfortable in his new reality. "If you speak on my behalf." I thought of all the nights I'd spent going through records, tracking his deceptions, protecting what was mine. "No. Isla. The farm's latest harvest report." I cut him off, holding out a folder. "You'll need it for the asset division." He took it, frowning as he read. His face changed as he understood. "These profits, they're higher than anything you ever reported," I corrected. "Amazing what happens when you actually invest in the land instead of trying to sell it." The sound of tractors filled the silence between us. Lucas and the crew were bringing in the last of the wheat, just as my father had taught me to do. "I never understood this place," Brandon said finally. "What it meant to you." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." He pulled out a pen, signed the divorce papers without reading them. His hand shook slightly. "Walter made a deal," he said. "He's testifying against me. Like father, like son." The words came out sharper than I intended. Brandon flinched. "I really thought I could make you understand. About Nora, about the business. You thought you could make me small enough to fit into your world." I took the signed papers. "But I was never the one who needed to grow." He looked past me into the house. Our house once. Now just another thing he'd lost by trying to possess it. "What will you do now?" he asked. I thought of the agricultural college's proposal sitting on my desk. They wanted to use the farm as a teaching facility, combining traditional methods with sustainable innovation. Lucas had already drawn up the business plan. "I'll do what my parents did," I said. "Plant seeds and watch them grow." After he left, I walked out to the wheat field. Lucas saw me coming, jumped down from the tractor. "Everything okay?" I handed him the signed papers. "It is now." The wind carried the scent of earth and harvest, just as it had when I was a girl learning at my father's knee. But now there was something else in it, the promise of change, of growth. "Mom?" Lucas pointed to the horizon. "Storm's coming." I watched the clouds gather, thinking of all the storms we'd weathered here, all the ones yet to come. "Good," I said. The land could use the rain. We stood together, watching the wheat bend in the wind. Behind us, the farmhouse stood steady, its foundations deeper than any corporate tower. And in my pocket, the key to it all weighed exactly as much as it should, heavy with responsibility, light with freedom. The first drops began to fall.
I was sitting at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the endless spreadsheets that define my life as an urban planner. It was a typical Tuesday morning, until it wasn't. The envelope, stark white and unassuming, appeared on my desk between one sip and the next. No return address, just my name, Morgan, scrawled in a hurried hand. Curiosity piqued. I tore it open, expecting maybe an anonymous complaint or some unsolicited advice about city zoning. Instead, I found photographs. My heart plummeted as I recognized Caleb, my husband, wrapped around Serena, my best friend. They were laughing, sharing a moment that was meant to be private, meant to be ours. The room spun, and I gripped the edge of my desk to steady myself. My name is Morgan, and I thought I had it all figured out. A stable job, a loving husband, and a best friend who felt like family. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, the images searing into my mind. I was supposed to be resilient, analytical, someone who could sort through chaos and find order. But this was a mess I never anticipated. By the time I got home, I had replayed 1,000 scenarios in my head, each one more painful than the last. Caleb was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. The smell of his famous chili filled the room, but it turned my stomach. I watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile the man I saw in the photos with the man in front of me. He looked up, his smile faltering as he caught my expression. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. I tossed the envelope onto the counter. "Found this at work today." His eyes flicked to the photos, and I saw the color drain from his face. For a moment, I thought he might faint. Instead, he shook his head, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "Morgan, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because it looks like you and Serena have been busy." He opened his mouth, closed it again. I could see the wheels turning, trying to find the right words to say. "It's complicated," he finally managed. "Complicated?" I echoed, incredulous. "That's all you've got?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I swear it's not what you think. Serena and I were just what, Caleb?" I cut him off. "Friends? Because I don't have friends who do that." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. "I love you, Morgan. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to the life I thought we had. But the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. "I don't know anything anymore," I said, my voice breaking. We stood there, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. I could feel the weight of his fear, his desperation to hold on to the life we'd built. But I was driven by something else, a need for truth, for clarity. I needed to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Finally, I turned away, unable to look at him. "I need some time to think." I left him standing in the kitchen, the chili forgotten, the air thick with unspoken words. As I walked away, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, confusion, a deep sense of loss. But beneath it all, a spark of determination ignited. I would find out the truth, no matter what it took. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the confrontation over and over, searching for any hint of sincerity in Caleb's words. But all I found were more questions. How long had this been going on? Why Serena? And most importantly, who had sent the photos? As sleep finally claimed me, I resolved to get to the bottom of it. I would confront Serena, dig deeper, and uncover the truth. Because this wasn't just about betrayal, it was about justice. And I was going to make sure that everyone got what they deserved. The next day would be the beginning of a journey I never asked for, but one I was determined to see through. I spent the next morning in a daze, the events of the previous night swirling around my mind like a storm I couldn't escape. The photos haunted me, and Caleb's flimsy explanations only added to my confusion. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of it all. That someone was Owen. Owen and I had been friends for years. He was the kind of person who could see through the noise and get to the heart of things. I texted him, asking if we could meet for coffee. His reply was immediate and reassuring. I found myself at our usual cafe, nursing a cappuccino and waiting for him to arrive. When he walked in, his presence was like a bomb. He gave me a quick hug, his warmth cutting through the chill that had settled in my bones. "Morgan, what's going on?" he asked, concern etched in his features. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I found out Caleb's been having an affair. With Serena." Owen's eyes widened, and I saw the shock ripple through him. "Serena? Are you sure?" I nodded, sliding the envelope across the table. He glanced at the photos, his expression darkening. "I can't believe this. How long?" "I don't know," I admitted, frustration creeping into my tone. "But I need to find out." Owen leaned back, his gaze steady. "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet. Caleb's denying it, of course. But I can't just let this go." He nodded, understanding without me having to say more. "You know I'm here for you, whatever you need." His support was a lifeline, and I felt a flicker of hope in the midst of my turmoil. "Thanks, Owen. I don't know where to start." He reached across the table, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You'll figure it out. And if you need help, you've got me." As we talked, I noticed a change in Owen, a subtle shift in the way he looked at me. There was something deeper in his eyes, something that hinted at more than friendship. It was a glimpse of a possibility I hadn't considered, but now wasn't the time to explore it. Meanwhile, Caleb and Serena were carrying on as if nothing had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their affair, something beneath the surface that I hadn't yet uncovered. It was infuriating, the way they rationalized their actions, as if their betrayal was somehow justified. That afternoon, I decided to confront Serena. I needed to see her face, hear her side of things, even if it meant ripping open the wound a little wider. I walked into her boutique, the bell above the door chiming my arrival. She looked up from the counter, her smile faltering when she saw me. "Morgan, hey," she said, her voice too bright, too forced. "Serena," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, glancing around the empty store. "Sure, what's up?" I cut to the chase. "I know about you and Caleb." Her face went pale, and I saw the mask slip, just for a moment. "Morgan, Save it," I interrupted, my anger bubbling to the surface. "I just want to know why." She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. "It's complicated," she said, echoing Caleb's pathetic excuse. "Try me." She sighed, a hint of frustration in her voice. "It just happened, okay? We didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "That's supposed to make it better?" "No, I'm sorry, Morgan. I never wanted to hurt you." Her apology felt hollow, and I knew there was more she wasn't saying. But I also knew I wasn't going to get the truth from her. Not now, maybe not ever. "I guess that makes two of us," I said, turning to leave. As I walked away, I felt the weight of her gaze on my back. I knew this was only the beginning of a long, painful journey. But I also knew I wasn't alone. With Owen's support, I was determined to uncover the truth and find a way to rebuild my life. The cracks in the foundation of my world were deepening, but I wasn't going to let them break me. Not yet. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and unease. Caleb and I existed in a tense silence, each of us tiptoeing around the other, careful not to disturb the fragile peace. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, and I could feel it growing stronger with each passing moment. I spent hours combing through our shared life, looking for clues, for anything that might give me the answers I needed. It was during one of these late-night searches that I stumbled upon a phone I didn't recognize, tucked away in the back of Caleb's desk drawer. My heart pounded as I powered it on, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. The messages were there, plain as day. Conversations between Caleb and Serena that left no room for doubt. They spoke in a language of intimacy and deceit that made my skin crawl. I felt a hot flush of anger and betrayal, my hands shaking as I scrolled through their words, each message a dagger to my heart. I couldn't stay in the house, not with the walls closing in around me. I grabbed my coat and slipped out into the night, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. I found myself at Naomi's door, my neighbor and friend, hoping for some clarity, some way to make sense of the chaos. Naomi opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to concern as she took in my disheveled state. "Morgan, what's happened?" she asked, ushering me inside. I handed her the phone, unable to speak. She took it, her eyes widening as she read through the messages. "Oh, Morgan," she said softly, her voice filled with empathy. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything feels like it's falling apart." Naomi sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor. "You're stronger than you think," she said, her words a balm to my fractured spirit. "But you don't have to go through this alone." Her support was a lifeline, and I clung to it, drawing strength from her unwavering belief in me. But even as I sat there, I knew I couldn't keep running. I had to face this head-on, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, I called Caleb, asking him to meet me at the park. I needed to confront him, to hear his side of things once more, even if it meant tearing open the wound all over again. He arrived, looking worn and weary, the weight of his deceit etched into his features. "Morgan," he said, his voice tentative. I handed him the phone, watching as realization dawned on his face. "I found this," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. He looked up, a mixture of guilt and resignation in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, the words falling flat between us. "Why, Caleb?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why Serena?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't know," he admitted. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to get this far." "That's not good enough," I replied, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "You've shattered everything we built." "For what?" His silence spoke volumes, and I realized that maybe he didn't have an answer. Maybe there was no justification for what he'd done. As we stood there, the tension between us palpable, I felt a shift within myself. The need for revenge, for justice, was still there, but it was evolving into something more, a desire for closure, for peace. I didn't want to be consumed by this betrayal. I wanted to reclaim my life, to find a way forward that didn't involve being defined by Caleb's actions. Just as I thought our conversation was drawing to a close, Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to one of panic. "I have to go," he said abruptly, turning to leave. "Caleb, wait." I called after him, but he was already walking away, his retreating figure a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I watched him go, a new determination taking root within me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. There were still questions that needed answers, truths that needed to be uncovered. And I was going to find them, no matter what it took. As I walked away from the park, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles and challenges I couldn't yet see. But I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to face whatever came next. The days after my confrontation with Caleb were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between the urge for revenge and the need to maintain some semblance of dignity. I knew that I couldn't just sit back and let this betrayal define me. I needed to take control of the situation, but how? I confided in Owen again, meeting him at a quiet corner of the park where we could speak freely. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, offering a silent promise of support. "Morgan, you're handling this better than anyone could expect," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Am I?" I asked, feeling the weight of my uncertainty. "I'm just trying to figure out what's next." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Have you thought about what you really want out of this? Is it revenge or something else?" His question lingered in the air, forcing me to confront my own motivations. I realized I didn't just want to hurt Caleb and Serena in return. I wanted to reclaim my life, to break free from the shadow of their betrayal. But how could I do that without losing myself in the process? As we talked, Owen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing. "It's Naomi," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "She says it's urgent." I felt a flicker of apprehension. Naomi was the kind of person who didn't panic easily, so if she said it was urgent, it probably was. We made our way to her house, my mind racing with possibilities. Naomi greeted us at the door, her expression serious. "Morgan, I found something," she said, leading us to her kitchen table. There, she had laid out a series of documents, each one more damning than the last. "These are financial records," she explained. "It looks like Caleb and Serena have been funneling money from your joint account into a business venture." My heart sank as I scanned the documents. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd realized. Caleb hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been siphoning off our savings to fund Serena's boutique. My hands trembled as I tried to process the enormity of it all. Why would they do this? I asked, more to myself than anyone else. Naomi shook her head, her eyes filled with sympathy. "I don't know, but it's clear they've been planning this for a while." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, threatening to pull me under. But instead of succumbing to despair, I felt a surge of determination. This was the turning point I needed. I couldn't just stand by and let them get away with it. "Owen, I need your help," I said, my voice firm with resolve. "We have to gather more evidence, something undeniable." He nodded, his expression resolute. "Whatever you need, I'm here." Together, we devised a plan to gather the evidence needed to confront Caleb and Serena publicly. I knew I was treading dangerous waters, but I couldn't let them continue to manipulate and deceive me. This was about more than just revenge, it was about justice and reclaiming my life. As we left Naomi's house, I felt a shift within myself. The weight of my decisions was heavy, but I knew it was the only way forward. I had to take control, to protect not just my future, but also the truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events of the day in my mind. The betrayal, the lies, the financial deceit, it was all so much to bear. But I realized that I wasn't alone. With Owen and Naomi by my side, I had the strength to face whatever came next. The stakes had been raised, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. But I was ready to confront it all, to fight for the life I deserved. This wasn't just about Caleb and Serena anymore. It was about me, about finding my own way forward and emerging stronger on the other side. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to face whatever came next, and I wouldn't stop until I had the answers I needed. The community event loomed on the horizon, a ticking clock counting down to the moment I would expose Caleb and Serena for who they truly were. The plan Owen and I crafted was meticulous, each step designed to ensure that the truth would come to light. But as the day approached, I felt the pressure mounting, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me like a storm cloud ready to burst. I found myself pacing the living room, my mind racing with possibilities. What if something went wrong? What if Caleb and Serena managed to turn the tables on me? The uncertainty gnawed at me, threatening to unravel my resolve. Owen arrived, his presence a steadying force amidst the chaos. "Morgan, you look like you're about to jump out of your skin," he said, his tone light, but his eyes filled with concern. I can't shake the feeling that something's going to go wrong," I admitted, wringing my hands. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We've got this. You've done everything you can to prepare. Now it's just about seeing it through." His confidence was infectious, and I felt a flicker of hope reignite within me. But even as we reviewed the plan one last time, a nagging doubt lingered. Was this really the right path? Was exposing them in such a public way truly the justice I sought? Or was it simply revenge dressed up in the guise of righteousness? The day of the event arrived, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. The community center buzzed with activity, neighbors mingling and chatting, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit. I scanned the crowd, searching for Caleb and Serena, my heart pounding in anticipation. When they finally arrived, their smiles and easy demeanor made my stomach churn. They moved through the room, greeting friends and acquaintances, completely oblivious to the trap I had laid. I watched them, my emotions a tangled mix of anger, betrayal, and a lingering sadness for what could have been. As the time drew near, Owen and I exchanged a glance, a silent confirmation that we were ready to proceed. But just as I was about to step forward, Naomi appeared at my side, her expression urgent. "Morgan, we need to talk," she said, pulling me aside. "What is it?" I asked, my nerves fraying at the edges. "I overheard something," she said, her voice low. "Caleb's been telling people that you've been unstable, that you're making things up." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Caleb wasn't just trying to protect himself. He was actively working to undermine me, to paint me as the villain in this twisted narrative. Anger flared within me, but so did a renewed determination. I couldn't let him win, couldn't let him rewrite the truth. I returned to Owen, my resolve stronger than ever. "We're going through with it," I said, my voice steady. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. Together, we moved to the front of the room, drawing the attention of the crowd. My heart raced as I took a deep breath, ready to lay everything bare. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice carrying through the room. "There's something important I need to share." As I spoke, I felt a shift in the room, the air growing tense with anticipation. Caleb and Serena's expressions changed from curiosity to horror as they realized what was happening. I laid out the evidence, the photos, the financial records, each piece a nail in the coffin of their deceit. The room erupted in whispers and gasps, the weight of the truth crashing down like a tidal wave. Caleb tried to protest, his voice rising in desperation, but the evidence was irrefutable. Serena stood frozen, her charm and manipulation stripped away in the harsh light of reality. As I finished, I felt a sense of release, a burden lifted from my shoulders. But with it came a new understanding. This wasn't just about exposing them, it was about freeing myself, about reclaiming my narrative and moving forward on my own terms. The fallout was immediate, the crowd buzzing with shock and disbelief. But amidst the chaos, I felt a sense of clarity. I had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to build a new life from the wreckage. As the event wound down, Owen stood by my side, his presence a comforting anchor. "You did it," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "I did," I replied, feeling the truth of it resonate within me. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that I could weather any storm. The aftermath of the community event was a whirlwind. The truth was out, and Caleb and Serena were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered reputations. But as the dust settled, I found myself standing in the wreckage of my own life, unsure of what came next. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel was overshadowed by a hollow emptiness, a reminder of all that had been lost. I returned home, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Owen had offered to stay, to help me navigate the chaos, but I needed to be alone, to process everything that had happened. The weight of my decisions hung heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line, that in seeking justice, I'd lost a part of myself. The days blurred together, each one bringing new challenges. Caleb, desperate to salvage what remained of his life, began spreading rumors, painting me as the villain. Friends I thought I could trust started to distance themselves, their whispers echoing in the spaces where laughter once lived. I felt the walls closing in, the life I'd built crumbling around me. It was as if I'd been stripped bare, every vulnerability exposed for the world to see. I tried to focus on work, on the things I could control, but even that felt like a losing battle. My mind was a storm of doubt and regret, and I couldn't find my way through the chaos. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Naomi, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Morgan, we need to talk." I nodded, inviting her in. She took a seat across from me, her gaze steady. "I heard about Caleb's rumors," she said, her voice gentle. "You can't let him do this to you." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It feels like everything's falling apart." Naomi reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "You're stronger than you think. You've come this far, and you're not alone." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit, but even as she spoke, I felt the weight of my decisions pressing down on me. I'd exposed Caleb and Serena, but at what cost? The lines between justice and revenge had blurred, and I wasn't sure where I stood anymore. As Naomi left, I realized that I needed to confront Caleb one last time, to try and find some semblance of closure. I called him, asking him to meet me at the park, the place where our lives had first collided in chaos. He arrived, his expression guarded, the charm that once captivated me now a distant memory. "Morgan," he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Caleb, we need to talk," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. He shrugged, his defensiveness a shield against the truth. "What's there to talk about? You've already made up your mind." "I didn't want this, Caleb," I said, my voice breaking. "I never wanted things to end like this." He laughed, a hollow sound that cut through the tension. "You think I did? You think I wanted to lose everything?" We stood there, the weight of our choices hanging between us. I could see the pain in his eyes, a reflection of my own, and for a moment, I wondered if things could have been different. But before I could speak, Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to one of panic. "I have to go," he said abruptly, turning to leave. "Caleb, wait." I called after him, but he was already walking away, leaving me alone in the fading light. I watched him go, a sense of finality settling over me. The confrontation I'd hoped for had slipped through my fingers, leaving me with more questions than answers. But as I stood there, I realized that maybe the closure I sought wouldn't come from him. Maybe it had to come from within, from finding a way to forgive myself for the choices I'd made. The path ahead was uncertain, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I also knew that I couldn't let this define me. I had to find a way to rebuild, to reclaim my life and move forward, even if it meant starting from scratch. As I left the park, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that I could weather any storm. The air was thick with tension as I approached the boutique, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this was it, the moment I would confront Serena and finally lay everything bare. The truth was out in the open, but there were still pieces missing, threads that needed tying up before I could truly move on. As I entered, the bell above the door chimed, announcing my arrival. Serena looked up from the counter, her eyes widening in surprise. "Morgan," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Serena," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "We need to talk." She hesitated, glancing around the empty store before nodding. "All right," she said, gesturing for me to follow her to the back room. The small space was cluttered with boxes and merchandise, a stark contrast to the polished exterior she presented to the world. I could feel the weight of our shared history pressing down on me, the years of friendship tainted by betrayal. Serena crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "What do you want, Morgan?" "I want the truth," I said, meeting her gaze. "I know you manipulated Caleb, threatened him with something from his past." "Why?" She laughed, a brittle sound that echoed in the cramped room. "You think you know everything, don't you?" "I know enough," I replied, refusing to back down. "But I want to hear it from you." For a moment, I thought she might deny it, might try to spin another web of lies. But then her shoulders sagged, the fight leaving her. "Fine," she said, her voice resigned. "I did it. I told Caleb I'd reveal his secret if he didn't do what I wanted." "Why?" I asked, the question hanging between us like a challenge. "Because I was tired of being second best," she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "You had everything, Caleb, the perfect life. I wanted a piece of it." Her words cut deeper than I expected, the truth of them stinging like a fresh wound. But beneath the anger, I saw something else, a vulnerability, a fear of losing control. "Serena, you didn't have to do this," I said, my voice softer now. "We were friends." "Were we?" She shot back, bitterness lacing her words. Or was I just someone you kept around to make yourself feel better? The accusation hit hard, forcing me to confront the truth of our friendship. Had I taken her for granted, assumed she'd always be there without considering her own struggles? The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also brought clarity. "I'm sorry," I said, the words surprising even me. "I didn't see it, and I should have." She looked at me, surprise flickering across her face. "You really mean that?" "I do," I replied, feeling the weight of my own mistakes. "But it doesn't excuse what you did." She nodded, a flicker of regret crossing her features. "I know. I didn't know how to stop once it started." We stood there, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. I realized that this confrontation wasn't about revenge or justice anymore. It was about understanding, about finding a way to move forward. "Serena, what you did was wrong," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "But we can't change the past. All we can do is try to be better." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I'll make it right, Morgan. I promise." As I left the boutique, I felt a sense of closure, a release from the anger that had consumed me for so long. The confrontation had brought me face to face with the core themes of my journey: betrayal, justice, and the possibility of redemption. I stepped out into the street, the sun warm on my face, and felt a flicker of hope for the future. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I knew I was ready to face it, armed with the knowledge that I could weather any storm. As I walked away, I realized that the greatest challenge wasn't confronting Serena or Caleb. It was confronting myself, my own fears and insecurities. And in doing so, I'd found a strength I never knew I had. The weeks following my confrontation with Serena were a time of quiet reflection and gradual healing. The storm that had upended my life was finally settling, leaving behind a landscape I was slowly learning to navigate. I found solace in routine, in the familiar rhythm of work and the small joys of everyday life. Owen was a constant presence, his support unwavering. We spent evenings talking about everything and nothing, our conversations a balm to my wounded heart. There was a warmth between us, a gentle understanding that hinted at something more. But for now, I was content to let it unfold naturally, without the pressure of defining it. One afternoon, as I was sorting through a box of old letters and mementos, I stumbled upon a letter in Caleb's handwriting. It was tucked away in a corner, forgotten amidst the chaos. My heart skipped a beat as I unfolded it, unsure of what I might find. The words were raw and unguarded, a glimpse into a side of Caleb I hadn't seen in a long time. He spoke of his regrets, his failures, and the weight of his insecurities. He admitted to feeling lost, to letting his fears drive him to betray the life we'd built together. But most importantly, he expressed a deep remorse, a wish for forgiveness. Not from me, but for himself. As I read, I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a surprising sense of empathy. The letter didn't excuse his actions, but it offered a window into his struggle, a reminder that we were all flawed, all capable of making mistakes. I folded the letter carefully, placing it back in the box. It was a reminder of the past, but it didn't define my future. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about absolving Caleb. It was about freeing myself from the burden of anger and resentment. It was about finding peace within, about allowing myself to move forward without the weight of the past holding me back. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Owen and I sat on the porch, the air warm and still. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice soft but filled with admiration. "I have," I replied, feeling the truth of it resonate within me. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm getting there." He nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You're stronger than you know, Morgan." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that settled comfortably in my heart. I looked at him, seeing the kindness in his eyes, the quiet strength that had been my anchor through the storm. "Thank you, Owen, for everything." We sat in companionable silence, the night wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it. As we watched the stars blink into existence, I realized that my journey wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about finding my own path, about reclaiming my life and the person I wanted to be. I had faced betrayal and heartbreak, but I had also discovered resilience and compassion, not just for others, but for myself. The road ahead was open, filled with possibilities I was eager to explore. And while some questions remained unanswered, I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next. In the quiet of the evening, I felt a sense of closure, a peace that had eluded me for so long. The past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. I was free to write the next chapter of my life, to embrace new beginnings and the promise of what lay ahead. And as I sat there, surrounded by the warmth of friendship and the promise of tomorrow, I knew that I was finally home.